Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. It's pretty much impossible to deliver any project without needing to engage an expert somewhere along the way. And so in this episode, I'm going to take you through some of those experts that you might choose to work with or actually may need to work with because you don't actually have those skills yourself. And there'll be a second episode where I'll take you through some of the other people as well that you may also need. So this is part one of a two-part episode, as it were. Now, if you really are not at all happy managing anything to do with your project, that's not a serious problem. That is the time where you're going to need to engage a project manager. Now, in reality, for most of you that are carrying out smaller, simpler projects, what you're going to find is that the cost of a project manager effectively takes all of the profit or a large chunk of the profit out of your scheme. So if you've got those smaller, simpler, quicker projects, in reality, you are almost certainly going to have to be the project manager yourself. And ultimately, that's one of my goals. That's why I run these podcasts, why I put together some of my training, is to guide and teach property investors how to manage their own projects from the context that in reality, though, a lot of projects are too small to warrant employing a project manager. As projects get larger, then the cost of the project manager can be absorbed into the scheme, and as a result, you are in a position where you could obviously outsource things to a project manager. Ultimately, the project manager's sole job is to deliver that project on your behalf. Effectively, they're working alongside you, fully understanding your aims, desires, demands for the actual project, and they are ensuring that you get what you want. Now, I have genuinely worked on projects where I have never, ever met the client, the person who pays the money. Particularly when I was managing construction projects for construction companies, we would sometimes never meet the end client. We would always meet that client's project manager. That project manager would hold us accountable and feedback things to the client. And ultimately in two directions, we would get instructions back via the project manager. That project manager would probably have appointed other consultants as well, some of the other consultants that I'm going to talk about in this episode, and will manage those consultants to ensure that they deliver and they interface with your builder in the same way. The project manager will probably get involved with sourcing builders, tendering the project out to those builders, managing the process of obtaining prices, perhaps put together the contract documents as well, and manage the delivery by the builder, perhaps getting involved with payments and valuations payments, and any variations and changes, program issues, budgetary issues. The project manager could get involved with all of those things along the way, effectively acting as though they were you, effectively making ensuring that you can run your other businesses, you can get involved with other things, or indeed you can go traveling, do things with a family, whatever you want to do. Your project manager should be there to oversee the delivery of the project. And if you've got no desire to get involved with delivering projects, then you are going to need to appoint a project manager. If you're happy to deliver projects, then ultimately you become the project manager yourself, And there's other podcasts, episodes, and other training from me talking about all of those little aspects that you need to consider as a project manager. On bigger projects, there's normally enough money, so you could consider a project manager. On a lot of projects that you do, you're going to almost certainly engage an architect. So architects work at a number of different levels. In fact, if you talk to some architects, they will talk about RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects, levels of appointment. And it goes from something like 0 to 7 or 8 or something like that. I'm not saying I'm an expert on what all of those differences are. You could just engage an architect to do a high level feasibility scheme. You may do that before you actually purchase a property to work out how you can convert that property, how you can reconfigure the property, how many units you can fit onto a plot or something like that. You could retain the architect a little bit longer to put together some outline, more detailed plans, which you could then sign off and approve. Likely then take it to the next stage where actually a planning application is made. You may well then, fingers crossed, you get the planning. You may well then engage them to put together the building regulation drawings. That's a point where a lot of architects actually stop their services. You could go a little bit further and ask them to put together more detailed drawings. A lot of the time for the projects we need, we don't really need those detailed drawings. But if you're doing something that's particularly technical, particularly high end, you may well want that. I certainly had a lot of those drawings when I was doing high end residential or more fitting out and projects that needed a lot more visual aesthetics, shall we say, and the architects would do us some detailed drawings for that. Architects can also be retained to provide ongoing support. They can and will sometimes quote to be your project manager. They can carry out the role of contract administrator as well. But in reality, most people engage them up to the point where they've delivered the drawings and may then just refer back on a few little bits and pieces thereafter if any issues come up along the way whilst the project's being carried out. But in most of your projects, you're going to need an architect, or if not an architect, perhaps a semi-qualified architect, often called architectural technicians, architectural technologists. They are the people that can put together drawings and details for you and get you to your building regulation drawing stage so that you've got sufficient information to give to your builders so they can actually price and subsequently deliver the project. Now, with some projects, it's the planning element can be a little bit uncertain. And in those situations, we typically engage a planning consultant. So planning consultants work alongside architects to some extent, but they look at in a lot more detail at the requirements to be reasonably certain that planning can be achieved for your particular building in that particular area. So whilst architects will put together planning drawings and they will make planning applications for you, my recommendation is that if your project is slightly controversial in any way, then my advice is to always engage a planning consultant to work alongside the architect. Not to replace the architect, because planning consultants bring different skills. So a lot of planning consultants, or planning consultants generally, will they will read the minutes that came through from the last local authority planning meeting, the last planning committee meeting that was held. They'll go through those minutes. They'll understand what the council are thinking, what they particularly want to see in their borough, what they particularly don't want to see, why applications have been approved and why applications have been declined, so that they can learn from all of that information to give you and your architect a steer as to what kind of projects we need to deliver, and also what kind of design is going to go through with little or no problems, and which are perhaps going to be a little bit more sticky. And whilst it might be great to push the boundaries a bit, and perhaps sometimes you need to do that to ensure that you're getting the profit, the value out of your site, sometimes it's just even better just to build out something fairly vanilla that is going to go straight through the system, because of course that saves time, and if we can save time, we're invariably going to save money as well. Just jumping in to make sure that you have everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you would have heard me talk about my community, and I want to ensure that you know how you can join that community. Obviously, within these podcasts, there's a limit to the detail I can go into the recording, and of course, a lot of things are very generic. So, what if you had access to join me on a Zoom call for 90 minutes every single week in a group coaching environment? You could get your questions answered whenever they come up and learn from other members' questions. Plus, you also get 10 hours of training videos, an HMO refurbishment case study, some sample documents and checklists that will help you run your projects far more effectively. Membership of my community is just £89 a month. You get the first month free, and you can also cancel anytime after that. Plus, as a listener of this podcast, there's a promo code to help you save £20 every single month that you remain a member. So just make a note of VIP discount 20, VIP discount 20, all in capital letters, and put that into the checkout. You'll find the checkout on my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. Scroll down the page, you'll find the link for the Project Management Accelerator. Use the promo code VIP discount 20 and you'll be signed up at just £69 a month. I look forward to seeing you in that community very, very soon. Now back to the podcast. Planning consultants are not so good at working out how to maximize the space within a unit. That's what architects are much better at doing. So architects are much more creative. They'll come up with those really nice details. They'll come up with good space planning. They'll take account of light so that you've got the right rooms in the right place as much as possible. They'll consider, look at the views out the windows, the general aesthetic side of things. Whereas planning consultants are a lot more practical about how do we actually get planning. And to a certain extent, your architect and planning consultant need to work together, because architects quite often want to push the boundaries and push things onto kind of statement type buildings. And that isn't always necessarily the best way to go. Planning consultants obviously want to help you get planning, and you or your project manager may need to just sit in the middle there and actually work out what is the best way to go here, what is the way that is right for you, your risk appetite, your budget, your time scale, and ultimately what is the scheme that you want to deliver at the end of the day. So most projects will have an architect. Some of them will also need a planning consultant, but not all of the time. Another consultant that's going to be needed on a lot of projects is a structural engineer. So structural engineers need to be involved in any element of the work which fall under the structural part of the building regulations. So from the bottom, that's foundations. The foundations are holding up our building, so they become structural. We need structural engineers to design foundations for us. We need structural engineers to design the walls for us, and the lintels and the steel work that we need to hold up walls and hold up floors. They'll design the roof design for us, because we need to hold up the roof, and we need to know how we put timbers in the roof and how those timbers support the weight of the slates or tiles or whatever's up there, windows and other things like that. They'll also get involved with internal walls where they're load-bearing walls. And as I said, steel, if we need steel to create big open plan spaces, and columns and things that go with that as well. So they'll get involved with all of those elements of the work alongside your architect. So the architect will generally make proposals. The proposal is we want this large open plan kitchen, living, dining area. And the proposal is this is where we want the windows and this is where we're going to put the staircase. The structural engineer will work out how to deliver those proposals and hold the whole building up. I should have said in there, structural engineer also gets involved with floor design as well, because that's obviously holding everything together. And so the engineer and your architect will work together. Normally, the architect makes a start on the design, moves things forward, and then the structural engineer takes those ideas and inserts onto those drawings or puts together their own set of drawings and their own details to demonstrate or to add in the structural elements and ultimately demonstrate that the property itself, will stand up and it is structurally safe for living. So most projects where anything you're building completely new, obviously needs a structural engineer. Anytime you've got an extension, again, always need a structural engineer. Anytime you've got a loft conversion, because we're modifying the floor up there, we're modifying the roof, again, you've got a structural engineer there. If you're taking down structural walls, you need a structural engineer to design the steel work and possibly some columns to hold all of that up. So a lot of alterations, modifications are going to need a structural engineer. Whereas if you're just doing a minor refurbishment, minor reconfiguration, building an extra ensuite, you're less likely to need a structural engineer. I can't say that you will never need a structural engineer, but you're less likely to need a structural engineer in those situations. And then once the architect and the structural engineer have put their scheme together, the next party that you're going to need to engage with is a building control surveyor. So the building control surveyor ensures that your building is compliant with the building regulations. And the building control surveyor does that in two ways. And it's both ways. It's not an either or option. They need to tick two lots of boxes. The first thing that they do is they go all the way through your architect's drawings and your structural engineer's drawings, and any other drawings you might have relating to elements of the building regulations, and they will verify that the design is compliant with the current regulations. Now, by and large, architects and structural engineers know what's going on, and they're kept up to date with the local the relevant building regulations. So by and large, those drawings and details you get are pretty much going to be approved straight away by building control surveyor. Sometimes there's a few little queries on there. Sometimes there's a few little things that need clarifying and tweaking. Sometimes they'll ask for a little bit of additional information. But by and large, the information from your architect and structural engineer should be approved as a desktop exercise, looking at the drawings on the desk in the office. The surveyor will go through that and say, yes, this design complies with the building regulations. Now, the second thing the building control surveyor then has to do is verify that your builder actually delivers what is in those drawings. So there's no point in having a nicely compliant set of drawings and then the builder not actually delivering against those drawings out on site. So that's the second part of the building controls surveyor remit. They'll come to site on a regular basis, normally a lot more times in the early days and less towards the end, and they want to sign off any element within that construction, within that refurbishment, within that conversion that falls under the building regulations. So they will want to come and see that, for instance, you've dug your foundations correctly. They are dug to the right depth. We've got bearing on solid strata. Then they'll come back and check that you've concreted it correctly, because there's no point in putting really sandy, concrete with far too much sand in it, because it'll fall to pieces and it doesn't hold the building up. And then they'll come out and they'll look at the drainage, and they'll look at the walls and the roofs and the floors and all of those other things, that I was talking about earlier on. And they will sign these off as the work proceeds with your builder, or they'll flag up shortcomings where some of these things, perhaps the first time round, aren't correct, and your builder needs to go back and remedy little defects or little bits and pieces with those elements that perhaps for one reason or another haven't actually been constructed in accordance with the drawings. And of course, some of that work is also signed off or verified because we get certificates from third parties. We might get some fencer certificates for the window installation to prove that the windows are compliant. So this building control surveyor doesn't necessarily have to look at the windows. They can now look at a certificate. You'll almost certainly have a certificate for the electrics, for gas, for ventilation, and fire alarms, emergency lights, things like that. All of those elements that fall under the safety of the property, that fall under the building regulation parts there. They'll just wait for a certificate. So they won't necessarily come around and test all the electrics. They want to see that your electrics are signed off by a competent electrician that can deliver all of those certificates. So those are the first 5 experts that I wanted to take you through on this episode. I'll do another episode with some of the other experts that you could be working with as your projects get a little bit more complex, a little bit larger. These first 5 are the ones that you're going to need of most projects you do, and certainly as you start to get larger, you're going to need them on all of those projects. The next consultants, you're not going to need them on every project. So that will be the subject of another podcast coming very, very soon. So I'll catch up with you very soon on that or any other podcast.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.